Backstage, Eric Clapton stood motionless. His hands trembled as he gripped his guitar. He whispered to no one in particular. "I don't know anything." London. December 1966. The Polytechnic of Central London. A cold Tuesday night that would split the history of guitar playing into before and after. On the walls across the city, graffiti declared, "Clapton is God." It wasn't a joke. It wasn't hyperbole. By late 1966, Eric Clapton had become the standard against which all other guitarists were measured. He'd left the Yardbirds because they weren't pure enough. He'd played with John Mayall's bluesbreakers and redefined what electric blues could sound like in British hands. Now, with Cream, he was creating something entirely new, loud, technical, virtuosic. At 21 years old, Eric Clapton was untouchable. The show that night was a typical Tuesday club gig. Cream was headlining. The venue held maybe 300 people. Students mostly. Blues enthusiasts. The London music scene insiders who needed to see everything, to witness every moment. Clapton arrived at the venue at 7. He was quiet, as always. Carrying his Gibson in its case. Nodding to the promoter. Finding the small backstage room where he could tune up and prepare. He sat on a folding metal chair. Opened the case. Lifted out the guitar that had helped make him a god. The dressing room door opened. Chas Chandler walked in, former bassist for the Animals, now managing a new artist he'd discovered in New York. Behind him, a thin young man with an enormous afro, wearing a military jacket and holding a right-handed Stratocaster strung upside down for left-hand playing. "Eric," Chas said, "this is Jimi Hendrix. Just got to London last month. He's opening for you tonight." Clapton looked up. Extended his hand. "Welcome to London." Jimmy shook it. His grip was light. His eyes took in the room. The brick walls, the single bulb hanging from the ceiling, the scattered equipment cases. "Thanks for having me, man," he said quietly. His American accent sounded strange in this basement full of British blues revivalists. "First time playing London?" Clapton asked, making conversation while his fingers moved automatically across the fretboard, checking tuning. "Second," Jimmy said. "Played a club in Soho last week. 12 people showed up." He smiled slightly. "Hoping for more tonight." Clapton nodded, already half focused on his pre-show routine. He was polite but distant. He had no reason to pay particular attention to this opening act. Every week there was someone new. Someone trying to make it. Most of them didn't. Jimmy found a corner of the room. Sat on the floor cross-legged. Began tuning his Stratocaster without speaking. At 8:30, the stage manager knocked. "Hendrix, you're on in 5. Jimmy stood. Slung his guitar across his shoulder. Walked toward the door. Paused. Turned back to Clapton. "What's your favorite song?" he asked. Clapton looked up, surprised by the question. "What?" "Your favorite song. The one you love playing most." Clapton thought for a moment. "Right now? Killing Floor. Howlin' Wolf. You know it?" Jimmy nodded slowly. "Yeah. I know it." Then he left. Clapton went back to his guitar. Didn't think about the conversation again. Until 30 minutes later, when his entire understanding of music collapsed. Hendrix didn't raise his voice. He never needed to. Clapton stayed backstage during the opening act. He always did. It wasn't arrogance, it was focus. He needed the quiet time before going on. The mental preparation. The space to become the guitarist everyone expected to see. But around the third song of Hendrix's set, something changed. The sound coming from the stage was different. Clapton couldn't identify it at first. It wasn't louder. It wasn't faster. It was something else. Something in the texture of it. The way the guitar seemed to be speaking in full sentences instead of individual notes. He stood. Walked to the side of the stage where he could see without being seen. Jimi Hendrix stood center stage, barely moving. His eyes were closed. The Stratocaster hung from his shoulder at an angle that looked almost awkward, almost wrong. But his hands were doing things Clapton had never seen. The guitar wasn't just making sound. It was breathing, crying, laughing. Every note seemed to contain 3 or 4 others hidden inside it. The feedback wasn't accidental. It was orchestrated, controlled, weaponized into melody. And then Jimi opened his eyes, looked directly at where Clapton was standing in the wings, and said into the microphone, "This one's for Eric." He began playing Killing Floor. The crowd erupted. They knew what this was. They knew Clapton was backstage. They knew this was a statement. But it wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a duel. It was something far more devastating. It was a redefinition. Jimi played Killing Floor, the way someone might translate a book from one language to another, keeping every word but somehow making it mean more, revealing dimensions the original author hadn't known existed. He bent notes that shouldn't bend. He created harmonics from thin air. He made the guitar sound like it was drowning and being saved simultaneously. Clapton stood in the darkness of the wings, and something inside him broke. Not his ego, though that would break later. Not his confidence, though that would shatter completely within the hour. What broke first was simpler and more profound. The story he'd been telling himself about what a guitar could do. The song ended. The crowd's applause was different from normal applause. Slower. Heavier. The sound of people who just witnessed something they didn't have language for yet. Jimi said nothing. Just moved into the next song. Clapton walked back to the dressing room. Sat down in the metal folding chair. Stared at his own guitar. In that quiet moment, Hendrix did something no one expected. The set ended. Jimi walked off stage to genuine applause, not the polite reception of an opening act, but something approaching reverence. He came straight to the dressing room, guitar still slung over his shoulder, sweat visible on his forehead. Clapton was exactly where Jimi had left him. Sitting. Staring at his guitar. That was... Clapton started then stopped. He didn't have words. Jimi sat down on the floor again. Same cross-legged position. He pulled a cigarette from his jacket pocket, lit it, took a long drag. "You asked what my favorite song was?" Jimi said quietly, smoke drifting in the dim light. "I wanted to show you mine. That was my favorite song," Clapton said. "I know." Jimi smiled slightly. "But it's not owned by you or me or Howlin' Wolf. Songs don't belong to anybody. They're just waiting. Waiting for someone to find what's hiding inside them." Clapton looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. This quiet American who just dismantled everything Clapton thought he understood about the instrument he'd dedicated his life to. "How long have you been playing?" Clapton asked. "Since I was 15. About 8 years. The same amount of time as Clapton. The same instrument. The same blues foundation. But somehow... I don't know anything," Clapton said, the words falling out before he could stop them. "I thought I did. People write my name on walls. They call me..." He stopped. Couldn't say it. "But I just watched you play my favorite song and I realized I've been speaking the language wrong this whole time." Jimi took another drag of his cigarette. "You speak it fine, man. You speak it like Clapton. That's worth something. It's not what you're doing." "No," Jimi agreed. "But it doesn't have to be. There's room for more than one way. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the meaning of this moment is still unfolding." The stage manager knocked. "Cream, you're on in 10. Clapton didn't move. "Eric?" The knock came again. 10 minutes. He stood slowly. Picked up his guitar. His hands were shaking. Actually shaking. He'd played thousands of shows. He'd never experienced stage fright. But now... "I can't go out there," he said quietly. "Not after what you just did. They're going to hear the difference. They're going to know I'm not..." Jimi stood up. stubbed out his cigarette, walked over to Clapton and put one hand on his shoulder. "You know what the difference is between good and great?" Jimi asked. Clapton shook his head. "Good musicians try to show you what they know. Great musicians try to show you what the music knows. You're already great, Eric. You just forgot the music is smarter than both of us." Clapton looked at him. How do I play after what you just did?" "You don't play after me. You play after silence. The audience doesn't care what happened before. They only care what's happening now. So go out there and be in the now." It was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to Clapton. And the most devastating. Because implicit in that kindness was the truth. Jimi Hendrix had just raised the ceiling on what guitar playing could be, and everyone in the building knew it. Clapton walked to the stage. His band was already there, Jack Bruce on bass, Ginger Baker on drums. They looked at him with questions in their eyes. They'd heard Hendrix too. "Just play," Clapton told them. "Play like we always play." They opened with "Spoonful." Clapton's fingers found the notes. The muscle memory kicked in. The technical proficiency was still there. He played well. He played very well. But he could feel it. The difference. The before and after. The audience applauded between songs. They cheered. They clearly loved Cream. But there was something else now. A new standard. A new question that would hang over every guitarist who played in London from this night forward. But can you do what Hendrix does? What followed stayed with everyone in the room, long after the last note faded. After the show, Clapton didn't go to the usual pub. Didn't celebrate with the band. He went home to his flat in Chelsea, put his guitar in the corner, and sat in darkness for 3 hours. He wasn't angry. He wasn't jealous. He was something more complicated. He was grateful and terrified in equal measure. Grateful because he just witnessed the ceiling being lifted. Terrified because he now had to decide, would he spend the rest of his career trying to reach that new ceiling, or would he find his own way? 3 days later, Clapton went to see Jimi play again. And again the week after. And the week after that. He brought other guitarists, Pete Townsend, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page. They all stood in the back of small clubs and watched this quiet American dismantle everything they thought they knew. None of them stopped playing. But all of them changed. In 1968, Clapton broke up Cream. When asked why, he said the band had run its course. But people close to him knew the truth. He needed to start over. He needed to forget what Clapton is God meant and remember what Eric the guitar player could still discover. He spent the next 50 years discovering. In 2016, in an interview with a music journalist, Eric Clapton was asked about the night he first heard Jimi Hendrix play. He was 71 years old. One of the most respected guitarists alive. Decades of legendary performances behind him. "That night," Clapton said, his voice quiet, "I realized I'd been playing the guitar. Jimi was letting the guitar play through him. There's a difference. It took me 50 years to understand what that difference was." "And do you understand it now?" the journalist asked. Clapton smiled. "Some days. On good days, when I stop trying to be God and just try to be honest, I get close to what Jimi showed me that night in 1966. What did he show you? That the music doesn't care about your reputation. It only cares if you're listening." The guitar Clapton played that night in December 1966, the one he was holding when he whispered, "I don't know anything," sits in a museum now. Beside it, a small placard with a quote from Clapton himself. "Jimi didn't show me what I couldn't do. He showed me what I hadn't been listening for." 3 years later, Jimi Hendrix was gone. Dead at 27. But what he did in those 3 years changed every guitarist who came after. Including the one they used to call God. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Clapton still plays. But if you listen closely to anything he's recorded after 1966, you can hear it. The space between the notes got wider. The silence got more intentional. The music started speaking instead of performing. Hendrix didn't take anything from Clapton that night. He gave him permission to stop being a god and start being a student again. That's what real mastery does. It doesn't destroy. It opens doors you didn't know existed.